Welcome to the Bleep Bulimia podcast with guest Shani-Lee, Wallis, author of War with Myself. Hi, everyone. I am Lorianne. I am the host of the Bleep Bulimia podcast. And today I'm so pleased to have, and I know that she calls herself Shani, but I like Shani-Lee Wallis, and she is the author of War with Myself, which is a really interesting title for a book. And I want to know more about that. So thank you so much for being here on my podcast. Really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Thank you for having me here and allowing me to tell my story.
Looking forward to it. So let's start with that. What
Okay.
inspired you to write that book?
Well, I remember when I was in the throes of my eating disorder, there wasn't a lot out there. And it was very different to what it is now. There is a lot more information out there because of the internet. There's more doctors and therapists and coaches that are more educated. But even now, when I go out and look for information, I think there's a little bit of a deficit as far as telling people and letting them know the why behind their eating disorder. And so I wanted to tell my story, but from the beginning. And some people might start reading the book and think, well, what does this have to do with having an eating disorder? I don't really understand. But it goes as far back as it needs to be able to fully explain and have people resonate that are going through the same thing and know that, wow, I'm seeing similarities. Now I can go back and find out why my eating disorder happened. So the book goes as far back as me being a child, my history. I grew up in an abusive household. And from there, my mom ended up having an affair with a married man, and we moved away with him and his teenage son. And in that household is where sexual abuse started with the son of that man. And so that triggered anxieties at such a young age. I was 9 when that started. And then later on in the book, it goes to my teens where I dealt with high school bullying. It was very physical and emotional. And I remember during that time, my teachers and people that I would tell in the beginning, they would always say, sticks and stones might break your bones, but names will never hurt you. And it was the names that actually hurt me more emotionally and stayed with me longer than the actual physical side of it. So as a teen, I'm already holding on to the anxiety because the sexual abuse is still happening in the household. And then now I'm having to deal with, having things happen outside the home as well, in a school setting where I should be safe. And so I ended up getting depression as well. So having anxiety and a depression over a long period of time, it's really not good for you. And it's just a foundation to manifest into something more destructive. And that something for me was an eating disorder when I was a late teen. And so further on in my story, I found it very hard to connect with people in a way where I trusted them, because I always thought, what do they want from me? Not just guys, but, girls as well. So I was very careful with who I brought into my little bubble. And as a late teen, I'd connected with a guy who came from America, and I was living in England at the time. And I knew there was a shelf life to this, short-term relationship. So more than anything, he was a very good friend. I trusted him with everything. And he was my lifeline. He was the only person around, because at that time I'd moved away from home. I had not many friends in the area. I was supporting myself, putting myself through college, and I was still dealing with the aftermath of the sexual abuse and the bullying in high school, and not really knowing how to deal with all of that. So the day came when Brian, my boyfriend, when he needed to leave and go back home. And I thought I would be fine, because this had been, in the works for a while. We knew the whole time that we were spending time together that there was a shelf life, and the day that he was going to leave. And I didn't realize it was going to hit me as hard as it did. So another thing that's in the book is the day that he left, I had no intention of binging and purging. This had nothing to do with weight related issues at that time. And that is another thing that I wanted to get out there. So the day that Brian had left, I remember feeling so overwhelmed. I cried for hours. It was like something you see in a movie. I literally crashed against the wall, slid down the wall, and just stayed in one place and cried and just didn't move for hours until I thought, you know what, I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to pick up some junk food and I'm going to do what everybody else, you know, on TV shows you to do when you're feeling emotional. You watch a movie and you eat ice cream or chips or whatever it is. So I did that, and I ate all this junk food, and I'm still emotional and I'm crying in between. My stomach was aching. It was so painful. And so in that moment, I made a decision to purge, but still it had nothing to do with weight. It was more of a release from the feeling I was having in my stomach, because it was, you know, it was full. I'd eaten way too much. So in that point in time, I did purge, but I purged just to release the pain in the stomach. And because I was so upset over a period of time, it happened more often. And then I think somewhere something shifted with the feeling of release I got from the pain in my stomach to an emotional release. And it was something I could control. So at that particular time, everything else felt so out of control for me. I didn't have any family support. I didn't have any friends to talk to. I didn't have anybody that I could sit down and, you know, just explain what I'd been through, explain what I'm feeling and why this part of my life was hitting me so hard, because I no longer had that lifeline. And so over time, I would say after a couple of weeks, once I'd calmed down a bit from Brian leaving, I realized I was still binging and purging. And even if I didn't feel too bloated, I would still purge. And this is what made me think in that point in time that there was a disconnect with the release of my stomach from the release of the emotions. And so I actually went to the doctors to talk to them about it and just let them know, look, this is what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm starting to lose weight right now, but I need help. I didn't fully understand what was happening. And the doctor had checked my BMI, said I was fine, nothing to worry about, and sent me on my merry way. Well, then from then on, it just went downhill. Yeah. So that is when my eating disorder just started spiraling, and over time got worse and worse and worse. But all of this is in my book, obviously in more detail, because I really want people to understand, well, one, what causes it in the first place, because I think it's really important for people that are in recovery to understand the why, because it creates a better foundation for your recovery, because you're just going to target the symptoms if you don't target the cause. So then you're going to have that revolving cycle of people, you know, going back and relapsing, especially if they don't understand or haven't spoken to anybody or any therapists about why they have that eating disorder in the first place.
May I interject there very quickly? And this is really interesting because most people, it started as a diet gone wrong. However, it was an emotional thing because of the bullying, because of the people talking, oh, you're getting fat and stuff like that. So you're trying to fit into the social community. But your loss of Brian, who was your anchor, they do say that the stomach quite often revolves around senses of pain. So if you're in pain in your heart, your stomach will feel it. It's just like anxiety. How many people say I get knots in my stomach, right? So that anxiety, that feeling of being left, any kind of thing can resolve there. So yes, then feeling that comfort foods will fill it in, but then you realize no, and then you purge those feelings, and they can be anger, they can be sorrow, they can be whatever. A lot of people don't understand that this whole sense, and you're speaking to it, of bulimia is purging your feelings. Exactly. Like you eat your feelings and then you purge them. And when you purge them, it's almost like a ritual of like, but it doesn't go away. You think it will. You think it will. It's a false thought. But I love what you're saying, because it absolutely is an emotional, they call it a disease. I don't call it, I think I like to call it, it's an emotional crutch that you have to let go of.
I agree, because eating disorders are there for a purpose, right? I'm not pro eating disorders, but the purpose is to help you overcome a fear, a trauma, emotional feelings, everything like that. It's just not a healthy thing. So it's really important for people to actively look for other avenues that are more healthy. And I wanted to pinpoint as well, even though it didn't start off as a weight-related issue, it soon became that. Once, because that was the only thing that I could control. And I remember as soon as I started losing weight and people noticing and people complimenting me, I fed off that, because I didn't really have anything positive in my life. So I'm holding on to every little bit of positivity that I can get, and that fed me. And so over time, I would be looking for things. Okay, what can I do to lose more weight? I would work out more. I would binge more often. I would purge even if I had eaten something healthy and if I didn't feel bloated. So it very quickly got out of hand. And for a long time, though, I did think I was in control. And when I found out that it controlled me, that was a very emotional day, because I honestly thought I was in control and could stop at any time, which caused a lot of issues in my relationship when I ended up getting married, because he's like, why are you doing this? You are literally, throwing our money down the toilet.
Can I ask you a question? Did he know that you were bulimic before he married you?
He did.
Okay, and so did my ex-husband. Yes.
Oh, that is lovely. That is lovely that they were there. Yeah, my husband, I met him, and it was weird, because I'd met him and I felt like he would be a special person in my life. I just didn't know to what extent. And I did open up to him, not with everything, but I did open up to him. And that was one of the things I opened up about. And it wasn't until later that I opened up a lot more about the sexual abuse and how it affected me and things like that. But he has been very supportive, more so once he got educated. I think education for anybody that is trying to help loved ones is the key, because if you don't understand, you can't have the empathy that's needed to change your mindset with simple things that you say. Paul, my husband, he's amazing now, but he doesn't realize that back in the beginning, things that he would say would trigger me and revert me back to the thing that he was trying to stop me from doing in the first place. So I think education is definitely a key for those that are trying to help others that are going through the same thing.
So is that part of your book? Do you speak about relationships in your book as well?
I do.
Because I think that's really important, because I know, and God bless my ex-husband, but he really, he accepted knowing I had it, but never wanted to know why. And I did not grow up like you. I was not sexually abused or anything. I just felt it was my own feelings of being a perfectionist and not being perfect enough. So being overweight shows imperfection. So I'd meet a friend, she goes, oh, no, you can have your cake and eat it too, right? So you go with that, go, cool, I could look like super perfect. But exactly like you, at first I thought it was just something that I can deal with it. Then it became too emotionally related, that I realized I was using it to eat my emotions and purge them out.
Rather than dealing with them.
Yeah, that's the worst part of it.
Yeah. No, he was definitely very supportive, and it allowed me to start my journey into recovery. So once he actually became educated and had empathy, and he changed the way he was talking to me, instead of bringing me down and making me feel guilty for relapsing, he would change that to, but look, you've gone 3 whole days without purging. That's amazing. Like he switched it. And so every milestone became a celebration. He always, gave me a hug and told me how proud he was. Even when I relapsed, he would come over and give me a hug and he said, but you're still trying. You are still moving forward. You are further than you were before. This is a long journey. We know that, relapse is inevitable. It's just a part of the journey. And because he gained my trust, then over time we talked more about my why, which helped me more on my journey and allowed me to fully recover, which is amazing. I put it all down to him. I did a lot of work, but if it wasn't for his support, I don't think I would be here, honestly.
I love that. And as you said, to the whys, as I said, my why was different than yours. It doesn't, and I'm so sorry for yours because that should never happen. And that breaks my heart. But the whys sometimes are simple there, but to everybody out there, the listeners, understand there is a why. And no matter what that why is, some are a little more painful, a lot more complicated, but it sometimes is a simple why, like a simple why of you not having self-confidence, of you feeling you don't belong, of you moving around a lot of places and leaving your friends and, not feeling like you belong. It could be, and yet they're as simple as they are, they're still complicated in your mind because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that. Where can I find comfort? Where can I find comfort? Where can I find that person that I can completely connect with, whether it's a therapist or a human being? But I'm so glad you found your husband did that. For me, it was my sister. But it was after 30 years.
Yeah.
So can you share, how long did you struggle with?
20 years.
20, which is too long, but I'm glad you're recovered. I'm so glad, but this is what I want people to know. It's not always a 2 or 3 year thing. Sometimes it goes on that long.
Yeah. And I do believe it's because, I probably would have gotten more help sooner had my trust with doctors had not been broken from that day that I did try and reach out in the beginning. And so it did take a lot longer. And I do emphasize that in the book as well, that, even though it's a self-help book and it's got steps that I took to implement every day to help me on my journey to recovery, I definitely emphasize the fact that if I'd had professional help, I would have likely gotten better or recovered a lot quicker with that. I had to go through a lot of trial and error in order to recover on my journey.
But to that, and this is my opinion only, nothing, but I know that there's a few other guests I've been on. In the professional side of things, when you do go get help, because I also asked my ex-husband if he would come with me and he refused, which really kind of upset me. So as much as he knew beforehand the steps forward to my recovery, I just think he thought that I could do it on my own. I'm a very strong person, yes, but it would have been nicer if you were there holding my hand. Yeah. That's okay. And different people deal with things differently. They can accept that you are, but they don't want to have a part of the journey with you. But even finding, like, I had a beautiful counselor. Then when I moved, I lost her. Then I went to some psychiatrists. I mean, one of them basically told me I was going to die if I kept doing it. And that's not the kind of thing you want to hear. So really, and I think that you would agree with me, whatever the case is, you have to make sure that that person that you're speaking to makes you feel comfortable. So I left thinking that's not good. Groups even can cause you to want to go home and have a binge purge. And then I had one that was beautiful, and he said to me, he goes, like, you're like a China doll. You're cold on the outside, but very fragile. And I love that. But who you speak to, who you're with, is also very important in recovery, if you agree with me.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I've met people that have been to treatment centers, recovery centers, outpatient, inpatient, and it's not one size fits all. It definitely isn't. the way one person is motivated to recover, or they feel that they have enough support to recover, is not the same as another. And that's what I've seen with talking to all these different people in the different groups that I'm a part of. And so I agree 100% with that. You need to surround yourself with people that you feel that you can learn from, and also that you connect with, because if you don't connect with them, you're not going to open up and provide the information that is crucial in order for you to, you know, find your why, or even be receptive to what they're saying. Because the eating disorder voice, the ED voice, I'm sure you're very aware, when you try to go through recovery, it's almost like it gets louder. It gets more annoying. It's more prevalent. It's more in your face. And every time I try to do something to help with my recovery, it was always there. Don't do that. You're going to put weight on. Oh, your jeans are going to feel tighter.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, talking to yourself. It really is, but it's just your ED voice just trying to butt in, because again, it's there to help you overcome your feelings and, you know, your trauma, whatever it is that you're going through. It's just not healthy. And the more you try a different avenue, the more it's going to try and take over. I think the main thing is for people to get strong enough and have a strong foundation for recovery, that they're able to surrender to recovery. Because it's one thing acknowledging that you have an eating disorder. It's one thing saying, I think I need to get better for whatever reason. But if you don't surrender to it, it's so easy to fall back on all of those things that made you feel comfortable, and to listen to the ED voice and relapse. So, yeah.
I love your eating voice thing. So how I used to say it is, bulimia became my best friend. And
I've heard that.
You know, when you talk about best friends who are, and it's a big word these days, toxic, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
And they say, get rid of your toxic friends. Mm-hmm. But those toxic friends, or, you know, they're almost like narcissistic, because they are the narcissistic voice. Yeah. Really, you think about it, your looks, blah, blah, blah. And to put them away is really difficult. But you finally sit there and go, you know what? If bulimia was a human being, would I want to hang around with her or him? No.
Not fun.
No, but they keep coming back into your brain trying to say, no, yes, you do. But I think that's what you're saying is surrender. Like, and I love that. But that ED voice is not your friend. That Definitely. Was your friend. You have to let go. And that's really hard, because how hard is it to let go of a best friend?
Oh, yeah. Even toxic ones.
Right.
It's so hard. Yeah. I had to do that during my recovery, because I felt like there were people around me that sucked and drained all of my positive energy. And I just had to cut them out of my life, because I thought, you know what? If they stay here, they're going to drain on the bit of positive energy I've gained so far. And I can't go backwards. So that was a part of my surrender and my recovery plan, you know, that we put together. It's like, I have to nix everybody out of my life that is not good for me. And it hurt. It did hurt, because these were people that I still cared about, but, you know, it wasn't a healthy relationship. So if I wasn't learning anything from them, they weren't bringing me up in a positive way, then it just had to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And the nice thing is I learned from that, because I had to do the same thing, is that I still love the memories of the good times. But I'm not going to take the toxicity, or I really, it's overused, but really it's a word, to my future. So I love what you're saying. So is this all in the book? Now, do you, from your book, are you going to move on to what's your future plans? Do you plan on helping people who are struggling with bulimia?
I do. I feel over the past few years, there's been a gravitational pull towards helping people. And so I actually started to do coaching. And soon I'll be launching online and in-person workshops, and it's surrounded by EDIT. And the ed part of it is understanding your eating disorder and why you have it in the first place and the purpose of it. And then it is intuitive therapy. So we're all born with this intuition of, eating when we are hungry, knowing the signs when we're full, so it encompasses, intuitive eating, intuitive exercise, intuitive living, and taking care of yourself, things that make you feel good with your mind, your body, and your heart. And it could be meditation, it could be affirmations, it could be working out, it could be giving back, things like that. So those are the kind of things that I want to, work on with people. And I think coming from somebody that's experienced it, coming from a mentor, a peer mentor, I think it might be a little bit easier for some people that, traditional therapies don't work for. Some of the groups that I'm a part of, I reached out and let them know what my thoughts were and what I was trying to do. And there was such an influx of people that wanted something like this, because not everybody, first of all, can afford therapy. Not everybody has the time to go to inpatient treatment. People have tried it and it hasn't worked because they're not tailoring to all of their needs. It's just the symptoms in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. And then I go back to the why. So you have to allow people to open up and, talk about things like that if they want, because I've looked at other things like kind of like Eating Disorder Anonymous. Yes. And there's certain things you're not allowed to talk about. Yes. So for me, if somebody's coming into the workshop or the group and they've had a bad week and they just want to vent, I know that if they don't get that opportunity to vent about what is happening, they might go back home mm-hmm. and binge and purge, or if they're anorexic, it's going to be, restricting even more. So I think it's important to have a safe space for people, surrounded by people that are going through the same thing as them, and not just somebody who is coming from a therapist standpoint.
I agree with you. And one thing too that I find, and I don't know if you're like this, but there's a lot of people who are struggling with bulimia and who have done it either lately in their 40s or started since they're, me, it was from 18 to 48. But then they become so focused on the physical aspect of it, right? Like, so my teeth are rotting or my stomach's feeling bad. Well, yes, that is and you really have to say it out loud. It is a consequence of your choice. It's a consequence of your choice. You know why this is happening. And there's where I love to say that there's people who go, what is your why to succeed in life? Right? You hear this all the time in business. Yeah. But I love the fact that you're saying, what is your why that you made yourself self-sabotage yourself, really, ultimately? The one person that I spoke to said, the same guy who told me about being a China doll, he said, this is a slow suicide. He goes, it probably saved your life, as you were saying, in certain instances, it's safe, but he says, but it will kill you. Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that he said it's a slow suicide, I just sat there going, oh, I'm okay then. I still have time, right? But looking back on that, he's absolutely right. It's a self-sabotage. It is a slow suicide. Be aware of it. And so find what you're saying, your why. If you can help people to find that why, honest goodness, Shani, I think that's everything about it. Everything about where it starts, your why.
I just hope more and more people will delve into that history and find out. So yeah, so now I just want to get out there and help as many people as possible.
So where can my find you?
My website is warwithmyself.com, and you can find me on Facebook, and that's at War With Myself No More. And those are the two main areas, and that'll have my contact information as well. So if anybody has any questions about the workshops or the book, or even questions about my recovery and what I did to, to help as far as my recovery plan, they're more than welcome to reach out to that.
That's beautiful. I really, really appreciate you being here. I think, as you know, my podcast, I used to be a bulimia recovery coach. I stood away from it because what I really want to do is provide my listeners with alternatives of who to reach out to. Because as we said, not one thing fits everybody. So I'm so pleased that you came on. I'm really looking forward to posting this with people being able to reach out to you. And
Thank you.
I'm going to ask one question before we end. What was the worst experience you experienced during your bulimia that you can remember?
I would say there was a point in time, well, actually one particular time that I thought I was going to die in that moment. I was at somebody's house. I wasn't in my own home. And, you know, when you're hiding your purges, you kind of go to crazy extents. And this one day I was at a friend's house and I was in my room and I was having a moment where my anxiety was high, and I'd already purged a couple of times that day, and I really felt like I needed to do it again. So I planned it. I got the food, and I had nowhere to purge because the toilet was right next to the living area, and the toilet that was upstairs was right next to my friend's parents' room, and they were in their room. And so I felt the only place I could do it was in the bedroom. So I remember going to the kitchen and pulling a black bag, a bin liner. And I did this in my own home. I did it, you know, lots of places, but this particular time was the worst. So I drank lots of water and I purged into the bin liner and held it. And that day I put it in the closet until later in the day that I could get rid of it. But that day I'd already been so dehydrated. I'd taken laxatives. I'd worked out so hard. I'd purged, I believe, 3 times before that time. And the laxatives were also kicking in that moment. And so I remember as soon as I'd finished purging, I was getting lightheaded. And all the feelings of everything draining from you, and you get the cold sweats and you're seeing dark. And this had happened so many times before, but this felt worse. This felt like I was on the brink, like something was very different about this one time. And I remember going into the toilet, and because I thought I was going to vomit, but at the same time as wanting to vomit, I felt like I needed to diarrhea. And I didn't make the toilet, and I crashed to the floor. And I don't know how nobody heard me, because I was there until I woke up. But in that moment, I remember as everything was going black and I was on the floor, I thought, this is it. Like, what have I done? Like, I would love to be able to take it all back. But even though that was my worst day, because I thought I was dying in that point in time, it was really hard. I did it again.
Yeah.
I tried to promise myself that I wouldn't, but I still did. That's how much control it has over you.
Yep.
You think you're dying, and if you survive, you're like, oh, great, I can do it again.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. Don't think I had that bad of one, but my heart palpitating really crazy to the point where I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Figuring it out. I'm in my 40s now. The hot sweat, so yes, that I had even earlier in that. So why do we keep doing it even if our bodies are telling us, can you please stop? Right? Yeah. The other thing I like to tell people is I learned how to appreciate my hands, my feet, my legs, my stomach, like everything that works together. So I started talking to my body, and I know that my body was talking to me while I was bulimic. I don't know if you ever heard it, but I remember my stomach saying, I don't want this, and you're doing this to me. Like, I don't want you to do this to me. And my brain's going, yeah, but we're going to. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just like a fight with your whole body and mental state, right?
It really is.
Awareness. And that's what you're talking about. I love it. Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate you. And the notes, listeners, will be in there for you to be able to reach Shani. And I really thank you again for being here with me. Really appreciate you opening up and being honest about this. And
You're very welcome.
I am so happy that you're reaching out to help other people. I think that's really important. And thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me tell my story.
My pleasure. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit me at bleepbulimia.com.